Hi everybody, okay, welcome back. We're looking today at Jeremy Duff, Elements of New Testament Greek. We are halfway through chapter 7, so we got to the halfway practice. I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of exercises from the halfway practice which focus on what this chapter is all about, which is the other moods. Remember, the other moods are moods other than the indicative, and we've looked so far at the infinitive in section 7.3 and the imperative in section 7.2. Go back and check out those videos if you've not watched them yet. Let's look at these examples because these show you some of the things to watch out for, and there's also some other things here which you need to be aware of as you're encountering these other moods in other contexts. So here goes. Here's the first one, number 1. Baptidzete tous adelphous. Baptidzete tous adelphous. Okay, as usual, let's do the easy thing, find the verb, and you can all find where the verb is. Just take a look at this. That is the verb, baptidzete, and that comes from the verb baptizo. And as you're looking at this, you're immediately faced with one of the problems that you're often going to get when you're translating an imperative, is that there is one of the imperatives which looks just like an indicative, and it's this one. Baptidzete is the second person plural imperative and the second person plural indicative. Okay, tangled up today. Indicative of baptizo, I baptize. So this could mean you plural are baptizing, or baptize, an instruction to a plural group of people. And there is no way of telling, absolutely no way of telling, just from looking at the word, which it is. And there are one or two places in the New Testament where you have something like this, where it's actually not entirely clear whether the word is an imperative or an indicative. So you'll find at the back of Duff, both of these answers will be acceptable. In a chapter which is on the other moods, you might cynically think that they want you to spot this one, but of course what you really need is to be aware that both are possible. Okay, now having done that, you're not expecting to find a subject because it's a second person verb, and particularly if it's an imperative. And so what else have you got left? Well, you've got tous adelphous. By now you know what's going on here. These are both accusative plural endings. The article tous, hoton tu to hoi tous, accusative plural, and adelphous from adelphos. So the brothers, accusative plural. So that means you are baptizing the brothers, or baptize the brothers as an instruction. That's number 1. Okay, now let's have a little look down here at number 8. Fellow, is that number 8? Yes, no, forgive me. I'm getting very confused. That's number 7. I'll come back and do number 8 in a minute because there's something quite interesting there which you need to be aware of and you need to spot because you can easily make a mistake with it. Number 7, yes, I'm not going mad. Fellow, pempsai, angelon. Fellow, pempsai, angelon. So what do? As usual, we just go through until we find the verb. Let's stick the red pen since we started with it. Fellow means I wish or I want. All nice and simple. I want expresses desire in that kind of way. Now this is one of the key things to remember when you're looking at infinitives. Infinitives tend to occur in a fairly small range, a well-defined range of syntactical contexts. That is, alongside other particular verbs like I wish or I want or it is necessary, day, or in other slightly more complex structures that we'll come to later in the book. I want to do something. You're expecting an infinitive at this point, and lo and behold, that's what you've got. You've got pempsai, which is an infinitive. Now, I've told you it's an infinitive. You're expecting an infinitive because of this. Now, can you parse it for me and tell me where it's come from? Where has pempsai come from? And in particular, where has this little fella, the psi, come from? The answer is, of course, it's come from the verb pempo, meaning I send. Pempo, I send. And what's happened is that the aorist infinitive, which uses the suffix sigma and the ending I, so pempo goes to pemp psi, well, the omega ending has obviously disappeared, and the sigma has latched onto the pi, and these combine, as in other moods than the infinitive, to form a psi sound. And you can see why that is. It's very obvious. The pi plus a sigma, if you say that, ps, ps, you get the psi sound. So pemp psi is the aorist infinitive of pempo, I send, and therefore it means I want to send. And you can very easily see now, this is why the infinitive is your friend, right? If you come across an infinitive, and also, in fact, if you come across a verb like this, a verb expressing desire, or the kind of verb that likes to go with an infinitive, then you think this is going to be easy to translate. I don't need to be frightened of it because it's in chapter 7, not chapter 2 or chapter 3. It's easy to translate, and they're really very common. So I want to send. Now, what's left in the sentence? We've done the verb. We're not expecting to find a subject or anything like that. What we do have is angelon. Angelon. Just remembering from way back, the way you pronounce two gammas is with a ng sound, as of course in the very common word euangelion, not euagelion, and this word angelon. I want to send. And what's angelon? Where does it come from? It's the accusative singular of angelos, meaning an angel or a messenger. And so what you're all going to do, because you're reading the New Testament and you're expecting to see angels more than messengers, is you're going to translate, I want to send a, what we'll tend to do, what you ought to do is that, an angel. Right, now just think about it for a second. I want to send an angel, or I want to send a messenger. Which is it actually most likely to be? Well, if it were I want to see an angel, you might, or an angelon, an angel or a messenger, you might think it's more likely to be an angel because more people are interested in seeing angels than seeing messengers. Although if Paul is to be believed in the book of Galatians, we shouldn't be so bothered about that, but it's another story. But this highlights the vital importance of paying attention to the actual context of what is being said in the text. I want to send an angel is a lot less plausible than I want to send a messenger, because we're not the sort of people who send angels. We're the sort of people who very, very occasionally see them. And so much more likely in this context is I want to send, or I wish to send, a messenger, to the point where you'd probably say that if that were defined by the context and you translated it as angel, that's just wrong. Even though the lexical meaning of angelon, angelos, can include angel in some contexts, if it's obvious that it's a human messenger that's in view, you can't appeal to what the lexicon says if the context excludes certain kinds of that meaning. Now, why highlight that? Well, this is taking us beyond just this lesson and to the whole purpose why you're learning Greek in the first place, which is to understand what the text says. And this is the kind of insight that you get from seeing what the words actually are written in Greek on the page, rather than just what the decision that somebody has made for you. You need to think about what could this mean, because it's not always obvious that Bible translators and commentators make the right decisions. They certainly don't always make the same decisions. And of course, the classic example of this, where there's a debate over whether angelos means angel or something else, is in the book of Revelation, where Jesus writes those letters to the angeloi, the angels of the 7 churches. Angels or messengers, meaning pastors or ministers, they're messengers from God to those churches. That's an exegetical question that you have to deal with from the context in the letter. You cannot simply go, well, angelos means angel and therefore it's a heavenly being. You might like to ask yourself the question, is John more likely to send a letter to a heavenly spirit being, an angel, or is he more likely to send a letter to a physical human pastor? Think about that for a few minutes, and then you've got to figure out what angelos, I think, means in Revelation 2 and 3. Anyway, a whole other set of questions there. Give me 1 second, I'll scrub this off, we'll put another couple of examples up, and then we'll be right back and do some more. Okay, here we go then with a couple more examples. Number 8, me zete apolusai. Me zete apolusai. Okay, what are we going to do here? First, we find the finite verb, the main verb, and it is, of course, right here, zete, and that comes from the verb zeteo, meaning I seek. Just to remind you, zeteo. Now here you've got a problem that you might not have realised you had. Let me just explain what's going on here. If I just showed you zete and asked you what that means, you might very easily think that it comes from the present indicative active, zeto, zetes, zete, third person singular. He is seeking. He, she, or it is seeking. Because remember, that's what happens to zeteo. It goes zeto, zetes, zete. And there it is, right there. However, if you look in the back of Duff's book, you will see that he translates this as an imperative. And the question therefore arises, well, how on earth is that possible? Well, just remember what it says back on page 80. We're looking about 2/3 of the way down, where Duff points out, and I'm quoting now, the eo verbs follow the normal rules for the contractions, that is, including where you've got an eo verb and the epsilon contracts, pages 24 and 71, which gives the imperatives phile, philete, instead of phile, philete. So just to remind you, if you've got an imperative like luo, the present imperatives go lue, luete, singular and plural. But if you have a word like zeteo with a weak epsilon at the end of the stem, it's going to go zete, zetete. Now, of course, as before, that's because the weak epsilon at the end of the stem likes to be long, so it likes to be in a diphthong or a long vowel. What that means is, in terms of the letters on the page, this is indistinguishable from the third person singular present indicative active. So it could mean he is seeking, or it could mean, sorry, I'll fix this in a second, seek as an imperative. The question is, how on earth are you supposed to tell the difference? Well, there's a couple of ways. One way you're not supposed to know about yet, and you're not going to be told really in this book, and it's to do with accents that are sometimes placed on the vowels. But there is another clue that is right here in this example, which tells you that it cannot possibly be this one, and it has to be this one. So what I want you to do is take a second, look at this sentence as a whole, and ask yourself the question, how do you know for sure that this verb, zete, cannot be an indicative and has to be an imperative? How can you tell? Just pause for a second, pause the video if you like, and try and work it out. Did you figure it out? Here's a clue in case you still haven't got it. It's to do with this word. Just take another second if you haven't got it yet, and stop the video and try and work out. The reason is, and well done if you figured it out, the reason is that me is the negative particle. It negates a verb. Me is the negative particle that goes with the other moods. Normally, or we think normally, with indicative verbs, we use the negative particle u to negate a verb. So if this were an indicative, he is seeking, then if you wanted to negate it, you'd write uzetete. Uzete. I'm all in a different world today. Uzete. He is not seeking. But because it uses me, that tells us it can't be this one, has to be this one. The imperative is the verb that uses me to negate it. So this means, me zete means do not seek. It cannot mean this, which is why at the back you haven't got that as an option, even though just looking at the letters on the page, you might think, why is it? It looks plausible. Now this is just a general point for you to think of. The negative particles, me and u, often give you clues about the verb. Just think about that for a second. The negative particle, if it's a u, you know it's an indicative verb. If there's a me, whether on its own or in a compound like merkete or something, you know it's a verb in the other moods. Really helpful because it's another piece of information which is there on the page, and I bet your test at the end of the week or at the end of the semester or something will have something like this in it. If I were your teacher, I would certainly put it in just to make sure you're paying attention. So mais erte, do not seek, is an imperative negated with a negative particle for the other moods, mais. Okay, exhausted. Right, now what else have we got? Mais erte, and what's this? Apollusai, do not seek, what? Well, the object of seek can be a noun. Do not seek death, or seek a wife, or seek love, or something like that. But it can also be followed by an infinitive, which is what you've got here. It's just another one of those verbs, which is the kind of verb that sometimes is accompanied by an infinitive, and it's worth just being aware of that. And apollusai, of course, is an infinitive. It is from apolluo. Apolluo. Let's just write it down for you. Apolluo, which means to set free, to dismiss, or possibly, in some contexts, to divorce. Now you can see why the meaning divorce arises from the idea of dismissing, and how dismissing might be related to setting somebody free. In every case, it's somebody is being caused to go away from you, and it's not unrelated, of course, to luo, to untie. You might think, this is just an aside, you might think that you can get to the meaning of apolluo by combining apo, from or away from, with luo, set free or untie. And in this case you can, but just remember that in general terms it isn't possible to come to the meaning of a compound verb just by assembling the preposition and the verb stem. In this case it works, it just doesn't work generally. Okay, but in this case it's an aorist, because it's got the sigma. It's an aorist infinitive, do not seek, and here it is to divorce. Do not seek, to divorce. Okay, so that's question 8. Let's take a quick look at question 9. So I'm just looking at my watch because somebody knocked on the door and I'm thinking, who is that? And I don't know, but I'll go in 5 minutes when I've done this one. I'm sure I won't get into too much trouble. Here goes. Do you want to give thanks? Do you want to give thanks? Question mark. Okay, a little hint, by the way, when you're doing tests and that kind of thing, and I know some of you out there, you've got exams and so on. The reason you want to learn Greek is because you want to read the Bible. But nonetheless, you've got to pass your exam. Just to prove to people that you can do that, if you've got a question mark, pop it in at the end of the line or somewhere so you're going to remember to include it later. And then how do you translate a question? Well, turn it into a statement and translate the statement. What's the corresponding statement? Do you want to give thanks? Question mark. The corresponding statement, of course, is you want to give thanks. Well, where's the main verb in that lot? You want to give thanks. The main verb, of course, is you want, which is fellow, and it's you plural, so go through the conjugation in your head. Come on, you can do this now. Fellow, thales, thele, thelomen, thelete, thelusin. So fellow, thales, thele, and has he got? I've just make sure I copied this down correctly. Do you want plural to give thanks? Yeah, that's right. So we want thelete. Sorry, I had a note somewhere else that had the wrong verb down there. That's crazy. So you want thelete. That's the plural of the second person plural of fellow. And then this verb, to give thanks. Don't get into the messy chaos of thinking that the verb is to give, because there is a distinct verb in Greek to give thanks. There is a verb I give, didomi. It's quite a complicated verb. We come across it later. But give thanks is eucharisteo. Eucharisteo. Which, of course, is the verb from which we get the English word Eucharist. The English word is derived, as in the Lord's Supper. It's a Thanksgiving meal. So you want, and we need a form of this, eucharisteo, which means to give thanks, which means we need what mood? Just take a second. What are we going to need in order to say to give thanks? We're going to need the infinitive. Now, quick question for you. Do you want to translate this with a present or an aorist infinitive? Of course, the answer depends on the context. In this particular case, the sentence itself doesn't really give you enough of a clue regarding whether it's an ongoing action, an action extended in time in some way, or whether you're not saying anything about the action, in which case you'd put it in the aorist. So let's do it for both. What's the present infinitive of eucharisteo? That's easy. It's eucharistein. What's the aorist infinitive? A little bit more tricky because you've got some juggling to do with the ending. Let's get rid of that again. So eucharistein will be very easy. Eucharisteo is the main verb, is the verb that's in its lexical form. You'll find it in the dictionary. How do you turn that into an aorist? Well, into an aorist infinitive. You get rid of the ending, and then what must you do? Well, you want to add a sigma, and then you want to add the ending I. What happens to this? Do you remember? Yeah, I'm sure you do. It must find a way of becoming long somehow, either a long vowel or a diphthong. The problem is it can't combine with this diphthong because there's a great fat sigma in the way. So instead it sulks off into its corner and demands to be transformed into a sigma, and therefore we have eucharistesi. And then, because you've remembered, you put your question mark at the end, you can put that here. So you either have Theleta eucharistesi in the aorist, or Theleta eucharistein, the form we had written down earlier. Either would be fine, and either are marked correct by a Duff in the back of the book, so you've got no problem there. Okay, that'll do us for now. That's a halfway practice in Chapter 7. We're going to come back in the next video and look at the next exciting instalment, which is the participle. We'll spend a bit of time on this because it's a little bit more complex, but only really in the sense that there's more different ways that a participle can be used. It's very important, very powerful, so come back for that. And remember, 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, and we'll have you reading the New Testament in Greek in no time at all. Okay, God bless. Bye for now.